What makes the achievement of emotional sobriety so difficult is the habits we have, the patterns we have in our behavior, the habitual ways that we've come to think about things. We have to really become aware of those things in order to challenge them, because the consciousness that has created a lot of the problems in our life cannot solve it, cannot change things. So what happens is the first step is waking up. Bill noted when he was writing the 12 and 12 and in his discussion on step 12, that if we practice these principles in our daily affairs, that we and those about us begin to achieve emotional sobriety. So we have been now for, I think we've got Patrick, maybe you can count the number of videos we have. I think we've been at this for about 40 weeks or something like that, as we are journeying through the 12 steps and looking at the 12 step from the perspective, from the lens of how do these steps help us achieve emotional sobriety. And since we're going into step 9 now, right, made direct amends to such people that we've harmed, except when to do so would injure them or others, I want to take a moment and kind of review what's happened to us as we've worked the steps up to this point in time. How have we changed at this moment? Now, I've described the steps before as kind of following the arc of our own personal development. You know, we come into this world in a very, very undifferentiated state. You know, we're a sperm and an egg that come together and start to create life. And that egg that is now fertilized starts to divide, and which each division, it's differentiating into what we can be. And all of that's taking place within inside the mother's womb. We're completely dependent on our mom for everything: oxygen, nourishment, security, safety, everything. We're 100% undifferentiated from her. And the first act of differentiation is our birth. And the first thing that we do when we differentiate, other than coming through the birth canal, which we all did, or through a C-section, but as soon as we come out into this environment, now we need to start supporting ourselves. And that's where the first breath of our life takes place. Now I'm inhaling and exhaling, so I'm providing myself with the oxygen I need to survive. I am now starting to support myself. I am now on this path of differentiating myself biologically. And as we've mentioned before, the biological differentiation is just something that's instinctual. It's just going to unfold. Nobody told you to walk. You wanted to walk because that's what you could do. That's what you wanted to do. You wanted to do what was possible for you, to develop that ability to become whole, to actualize yourself. Well, we also have that same drive on an emotional, psychological and spiritual level. The problem is it's not instinctual in the way the biology is. The biology is hardwired. And for us to now differentiate into being what we can be, we need certain experiences. We need a certain kind of attachment that people write about all the time, a secure attachment. And there's tons of books out there about what happens when you don't get that. Bowlby was the first one to talk about all of this stuff. And we also need some emotional coaching. If the attachment is good, then the next thing that happens is we need someone to be able to teach us how to cope with our emotions, what kind of a relationship to have with ourselves. Well, our parents can only give us what they have, which is never enough. And it goes to this whole idea that Theodore Isaac Rubin talked about in his book, Compassion and Self-Hate, is that we're victims of victims. So parents No parent is feeling completely good about themselves. Everybody we know has a self-hating process, and they teach us to hate ourselves. They teach us to construct a false self. They teach us to construct a despised self. And so now the world starts spinning around all these should demands. And if I'm this way or that way, I'll be okay. And so we create an incredible distance from who we are to become what we think we should be. So we actualize a concept of ourselves rather than actualizing ourselves. And we all do that to try to control what our experience is, to make sure that we're going to be loved, to make sure we're going to be accepted, and make sure we belong. My God, what an order. To make sure that we're going to be accepted, belong, and to be loved. And we start to hatch this plan very early in life, and it continues to unfold as our cognitive processes develop and as we transform our cognitive abilities. And Piaget pointed all of that transformation that takes place in us cognitively, and it's a wonderful study. But here we are now in our life, and most of us, I call that the trance. That's the trance we put ourselves in, and that the culture puts us in, right? That we have to be what we think we should be to be okay. And a lot of times we don't realize that that's even a problem. We just dedicate our lives to it, and it becomes our reality until something happens. Some event happens in our life, and we start to realize the personal limitations of the trajectory of our life. And that's when a lot of people come into recovery, when they've hit this crisis and they realize that, look, I've been asleep. My God, there's so much I don't know. There's so much I don't know about life. There's so much I don't know about what I need to take care of myself. And that is the wake up call that happens in step one. In many ways, we start to wake up to the reality that we are not who we think we are, that life is not what we think it is, and that there's a whole new possibility that many of us could never have imagined. And so now we start our waking up, we start differentiating ourselves from these concepts we've had about ourselves. You've heard me say, and if you go to Herb's class, you hear him say all the time, the consciousness that's creating a problem can't solve it. Gurdjieff, who talked to us about us sleepwalking, says that what put us to sleep can't wake us up. The way we put ourselves into a trance, we can't wake up with that knowledge. We need new information. And that's what recovery is about. You can think of it as about getting new information. Now, we're going to focus on what the steps have done up to step 8 in a moment, but I just want you to think about it in terms of this way, that what we change, and I mentioned this a couple weeks ago, is that the transformation that is happening to us is we're not changing who we are, we're adding to who we are, right? So we're expanding our consciousness, we're expanding our awareness, we're increasing the number of possibilities. That's what life is. We're not going to change who we are, we're going to add to ourselves so that we become more whole, because that's what our life is about, right? It's moving towards this wholeness, moving towards holiness, towards unity, towards integration. It's so funny, step 12 even talks about practicing these principles in all our affairs. That's integration, that's wholeness. So we're on this journey, right? Now, what are we changing? Well, we're changing, number one, we're reorganizing our personality so that we're having a new experience with ourselves. We're starting to look at ourselves in a very different way. In NA, they talk about it is that we come in and we start to see that we're more than just our disease. That the way they put it, and I don't like to use these words good and bad, but they say that there's good and bad in each of us. But for us, we've gotten so focused on the bad that we can't see who we are because we're so focused on who we're not. Well, that's a serious problem for all of us, But now we start to change our relationship with ourselves. We start to have, instead of being in an adversarial relationship with ourselves, we now start to come into support of ourselves. We start to find compassion. We start to find ways to grow ourselves and challenge our attitudes that are toxic, and now replace them with attitudes that are more nourishing and nurturing to our soul, to our person, to our being. So our attitude, our experience of ourself changes. Well, so does our experience with the problems we're having. We now see these problems as having information. They're not defining us, other than they're saying something about what's missing in our life. And so now, instead of saying I'm bad and I've got to get rid of this badness, we're saying, my God, I have these. I like the way I think Glenn introduced it. We have these character defaults, not defects. They're character defaults that were based on adaptations we made to life, because that was the best possible thing we could do. But we did it with still the spirit, the overriding spirit of trying to maintain our centeredness, our existence, to whatever degree was possible. Which is a remarkable thing. When you start to think about that, that's in us. That's an incredibly powerful force that's trying to find a way to maintain our existence no matter what the situation that we're confronting, is demanding of us. So we're changing our relationship to the way we think about the problems we're having. These are now opportunities. I love the word that Thom uses, positive opportunism, right? Is that we're looking at these things as possible ways that how can I embrace this and look at this issue to grow me, right? Not as evidence of what a fuck up I am, or how, pathological I am, but as a manifestation of my existence and how I tried to maintain and preserve myself underneath very challenging situations. So now we're starting to have a more compassionate relationship with ourselves. So our relationship to our experience with ourselves changes. We become more self-supporting. Our experience to our problem changes. Now we start to look at these things in a very different way. We're not faulting ourselves from it, but we're embracing these things and we're unpacking them and looking for what they have to say to us. Now we start realizing we're fragmented. We got all these different parts that we're in a dance with all the time. The committee meets, as you hear it in the rooms, right? The committee's in session. Well, I love the quote Thom on these things. He says, we all talk to ourselves, but nobody ever taught us how to answer in a good way. We're in these dialogues all the time, but we don't really know how to have it. It's like we got to take ourselves in for couples counseling so we can know how to communicate with ourselves. Well, that's right. We do. We have to learn how to become coordinated to ourselves, because we're uncoordinated. We don't know how to put all these different things together. We don't know how to I call it Humpty Dumpty therapy. We don't know how to put ourselves, all the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty Dumpty together again. Well, that's our challenge. It's Humpty Dumpty therapy. Oh my God, it's a whole new approach. The Humpty Dumpty Institute, Thom. I think we've got a name for the institute we're going to start, the Humpty Dumpty Institute. Come and join us, as we clean up the yolk and all the other egg white and stuff that's spilled all over the place. So this is what's happened. But now, in addition to changing our relationship to ourselves, changing our relationship to our problem, we've realized that we also have to look at our attitudes towards life. And now we start to challenge some of what our expectations are about how, not only how we're supposed to be, but how life is supposed to be. And so that comes under scrutiny. And we start to say, are these attitudes I have working? We're told until we let go of our old ideas, the result is nil. But sometimes these are so habitual, we don't even realize some of the attitudes we have are our old ideas. They seem fresh. They seem right, because we haven't challenged them, because we're still clinging to them as though we need them. And when we really don't. So the other area that we change is in our relationship with our fellows and with our partners. And so all these areas, our relationship to ourselves, to our problems, to life, and to relationships, are now in a state of flux and are transforming. One way of thinking about what's happened up to step 8, the first 7 steps have started us to challenge all of those things, our attitude towards ourselves, towards problems, towards life. And now we're starting to include challenging our relationship with others. And if this arc is the arc that I'm saying it is moving from a state of undifferentiated to a state of differentiation, it means we're learning how to have a healthier contact or connection with the experiences we're having, which means with the people that are in our life as well. How can I make contact with those that I love and care about in a way that's going to be bringing my best self forward? So one of the things we're learning when we work step 8, and we talked about working step 8 in a very, very rigorous way, looking at first the harm we've done to ourselves and using that as a context to understand the harm we've done to others. Because what the truth is, the golden rule is you treat other people the way you treat yourself. And that's what we realized in step 8. That's what we're doing. We treat other people the way we treat ourselves. So if I'm making demands on myself, you can rest assured I'm going to make those demands on you. If I despise parts of myself, I'm going to despise parts of you. I'm not going to be able to enjoy you and encourage your full expression of yourself if I'm unable to give myself that kind of support as well. So we have to take a look at ourselves. Now, this is the prototype for how we show up in relationships, because up to this point in time, when there's trouble, what do we look at? Who's to blame? Is it your fault or mine? And since I want to be fair, I'm going to make it your fault most of the time. That's what I call fair. You know, if I point out what a knucklehead you are, we can finally have a good relationship. And of course, I'm doing that out of the generosity of my heart, is to make you a better person. So our first step as we're turning this around in step 8 is to do what? To take a look at ourselves. That's what step 8 is about. It's not looking at the harm others have done to us. It's looking at what are we doing? What have we done? How have we shown up in a way that's not the best? That's not healthy. That is a principle of healthy functioning in a relationship. When something's going wrong, when I'm upset, I don't look at what you're doing to upset me. I don't say, God damn you, Brian, you're making me upset right now. You know, how dare you talk to me that way? No, if I get upset with the way Brian's talking to me, there's something wrong with me, not Brian. He's just trying to express himself in the best way he can. And if I expect that he's got to do that perfectly, my God, what a setup that is, isn't it? So I quit regulating other people, quit telling other people and trying to control them and how they need to behave. I take a look at what I need to do to get centered, to hold on to myself better. And the first step in that is taking a look at myself. What's going on with me, not what's going on with you. That's what step 8 is teaching us. Put the focus where the focus needs to be. If you're going to be a mature individual and differentiate it, you're looking at yourself, not other people. And then what do we do with that? We take responsibility for what we've done. That's what step 9 is about. It's radical responsibility. I'm looking at myself, and now I'm going to come to you and talk to you about it and try to clean up my side of the street. We are now learning how to show up in our relationships. We're learning the most important skill we've never learned in terms of being connected to somebody else. Look at myself, not you. Look at what's going on with me, not you. And that's a lot easier said than done. Trust me. Most couples, when they start therapy with me, it's all about, well, this is what he's doing. And look at how he's behaving. And my God, now he's doing that. And he talks away and he won't stand and listen to me. And da da da. Wow. Person has very little awareness of what they're doing, and that they're even so focused on the other person. That feels like the right thing to do. If I point out the problem, then maybe you'll do something about it. So I want to put the whole context of what's happening here in steps 8 and 9 is that we are learning how to show up in our relationships. We're learning how to show up in a healthy way. We're learning how to show up and make the best possible contact with the people we love and care about. That's what this step is all about. And we're going to be digging into this a lot over the next 40 weeks. No, it may not take that long, but it may, just depending. I just saw a thumbs up from Susie. Yep, this is a big one, man. We all got a lot to learn around this, and we do. I've still got a lot to learn on it. I know that to be the case, and we all do. And that's what's happening here is we are learning the prototype for healthy behavior. And to do that, we have to differentiate ourselves. We have to quit taking what the other person is doing personally and look at what it means to us personally. I don't think I've ever said it like that before, but I'll say that again. We've got to quit taking what the other person's doing personally, and we need to look at what it means to us personally. That's the way we start to unravel this stuff. Now, the biggest mistake that we can make in this is trying to be more than we are. Don't try to be healthier than you are. You'll not pull it off. It won't work. You've got to be able to support yourself in this. So sometimes it means going through blaming and then listening to yourself and saying, my God, I just realized what I was doing. See, that's the step towards undoing this stuff, is not being all of a sudden a spiritual saint and that you've got this all figured out and you're going to forgive somebody before they even step on your toes. No, that's not what we're going for. What we're going for is getting down in this messy, mucky, situation that's we call our lives, and getting in there and figuring all of that out. So that's the context I wanted to put this discussion in as we continue next week in terms of getting specifically into, making these amends, except when to do so would injure them or others. But that's what this is about, is we are learning now how to have a healthier relationship with those people we care about and love. And look, and in some way, it also parallels having a healthier relationship with ourselves, right? Because we're also looking at, as we said before, as a harm we've done ourselves, and now doing what we can do to bring the best possible attitude towards our life and towards our relationship. So remember that 6 and 7 was about our now looking towards what's the best possible attitude that we can bring to our life, to our relationships, to our relationship with ourselves, and to our relationship with life, as well as with our higher power. People examine that too in this context. So with that said, I will now open this up for comments from my two colleagues who I really listened to the show you guys did last week. Thank you guys for supporting and filling me in. Tom, I thought it was wonderful that you didn't try to be Alan Berger, because I'm still trying to figure out how to be Alan Berger. And if you figured out before me, I'd have a resentment towards you.
Well, if I did an impersonation of you, you would have a resentment.
I might.
No, I think he'd have pity, Tom. I think that would be the word. But no, maybe not. Maybe not.
Maybe we should just switch roles and be
back with you guys. It's really good to be back with you.
Well, we missed you, Alan, and I'm glad your trip was a success and you got some more wonderful experience about and spreading the word of your book, because
Yes.
it's an amazing book. And I'm as you know, a little plug for our podcast right now is we're going through that book bit by bit, and that is a great experience. You and Patrick and I are doing that, and it's sort of like going through these 12 steps again through the just going through it together. I just get more out of it. It's like a book study, and it feels like I'm in a 3-man book study, and other people get to benefit from listening in. So it's been really helpful. So I'm just going to share briefly about what you're saying, because I want to get on. I want to hear what people have to share, but I just want to say that first of all, you talk about blame and responsibility. My first sponsor, he had a lot of those really good isms, and one of the things he used to say is, "Blame's a good place to visit. You just don't want to live there." You know, and I think what you're saying is to be able to move through the messy part of, you know, we can't really recognize what we're doing about that until we let ourselves do it and do it out loud with somebody else, and we can hear ourselves do it. But I think I probably said this last time too. Step 9 is to me is the coming out. This is the place where we emerge into and we're moving from, and I didn't realize this before, but, you know, my whole process stuff is about, I always refer to my stuff as intrapersonal change. It's like, and it is about learning how to talk to ourselves and how to have communications with ourselves. And I never thought again about the 12 steps in this way, but it's really up till now, even though it involves interactions with others, because we can't do it without the program, without the other people. But the work is intrapersonal. And with this, and I love the fact that we spent so much time with step 8 being about our self-hatred, because it fit perfectly and seems like the perfect thing to do, to prepare ourselves to step out into the interpersonal world again. And it's like, and so that's what I see. And one of the things I hope that I want to talk about as we go through this over the next, 80 weeks or however long we're going to do this, is that is the intrapersonal process, hopefully now, is taking on a life of its own too. So it's an ongoing process. It's not like we switch from intrapersonal to interpersonal, but that we're rejoining the world. And, in step 9 too is the place where we come out and we tell people what we've been doing. I'm in this program where I'm working through these steps, and the reason I'm talking to you right now is because of the 9th step. So it's the emergence, and we're works in progress, and that's what I want to say tonight.
I also want to get to what other people want to share, so I only have a couple of statements. One is that I appreciate a lot, Al and Thom, how we keep bringing the focus back to oneself, because for about 30 years or so that I've been working primarily with clients in recovery, there's so much emphasis in program on learning how to be less self-centered, right, in the early steps of the program. And I totally get where that's coming from. Most anybody who's been in the grips of their addiction and then has a period of sobriety can only then begin to see how amazingly self-centered and unconcerned with others, they were during that period of time. So I get the focus, but for many of my clients, there's been tremendous confusion around that, because they feel like they're supposed to forget all about themselves. They feel like they're supposed to focus exclusively on being of service, which again is an important message. But it leaves out something very important, which is, if I don't put my attention toward myself and dig into who I am and dig into looking at what's hard for me to look at about myself, I lose my center. I lose my power. I lose my center of gravity in my life and in my world. So it's a real tough thing. It's a lifetime's work to figure out the difference between who I really am and who my ego is, right? With a capital E, my concern with prestige and importance and, having and acquiring and image and all that stuff. That's an incredibly confusing thing a lot of the time. What's the real me and what's my ego at work?
Yeah.
But what I like so much about the focus of this meeting is it keeps coming back to my problems with others begin with my problems with me.
Yep.
Okay? My problems with others begin with my problems with me. Like you said, Alan, I tend to do to others what I've already begun doing or have been doing for a lifetime to myself. And even in step 8 and 9, where I'm happy the focus begins to shift to a greater awareness explicitly on the impact of our actions on other people. But even there's a real central, crucial role to realizing if I'm going to shift how I am with other people, I still need to keep primarily focused on my self-relationship.
Well,
right.
And what happens here, Raj, and I've talked about this a lot, see, is that our awareness is and necessarily so focused on ourself. And what do I have to do to build the recovery capital I need to create my physical sobriety, right? That's so incredibly important for someone in the early stages of recovery. How do I initiate and sustain, first of all, getting clean and sober and then staying clean and sober? That's a very important thing, right? And we know that if you don't get that foundation, it's not that the work you've done is useless, because it's not. You're still building all kinds of information and insights into yourself with it, but it doesn't get the traction it gets if you're clean and sober. Right now, we get clear-headed enough to see things in different ways and all that. But here's the other part of it that's great. So our awareness needs to be on what's going on. What am I doing? How am I supporting myself, not supporting myself? How do I deal with the part of my addict self, that still wants to go out and party and says, hey, it's party time, it's not recovery time, those things. But once that happens, once I'm starting to deal with it, now I'm afforded the opportunity to increase my awareness to those people I'm in relationship with. And I love what step 8 and 9 is about, because it's about being aware of ourselves and also the other person. And if I'm integrated, if I'm differentiated, both of those desires to be connected to you, to join you, to please you, cooperate with you, and to take care of myself are now pushed forward. So I was going to talk about this more next week, but I think what you just said right now is important to introduce this concept. Being differentiated means balancing our desire to please with our desire for our individuality.
Yeah.
And when I'm differentiated, I'm in relationship to you. I don't lose myself, but I also don't lose you.
Yeah.
I stay connected to you. And this becomes so important in terms of learning how, when there's trouble with your partner, to stay connected and not get alienated. We're going to be going into that more and more, but enough said on that. But that the idea here, differentiation, is when I'm holding space for both of those awarenesses.
Yeah.
My awareness of my needs and my awareness of your needs. And neither overrides or trumps the other. They are both equally important. I'm honoring myself. I'm honoring you. Martin Buber called it the I to thou relationship.
I hear a lot of people criticize the 12 steps, that they're old-fashioned. I can understand that criticism. They were written back in 1935. Some people that are agnostic have difficulty with the word God used in the steps. For me, I look at the process that's involved, the forces that the 12 steps generate are so powerful that I think they're ageless. There's this interesting phenomena that happens when you work the steps. They create a charge and then a discharge. The first step, we're powerless. Our life has become unmanageable. It creates this charge. We're in big trouble and we don't know what to do. And then step 2 comes along and it says we have hope. That charge, that existential crisis that we have is resolved. What's happening here is parallel to life. We charge ourselves when we breathe in. When we exhale, we discharge. That's the rhythm of life. And the way I love to think about the 12 steps, it's helping us get connected to the rhythm of life so we can learn how to show up in a good way.